The Square Ball Podcast.
Welcome to the show. It's brought to you with West Yorkshire Electrical, specialists in all things electrical. If it's got wires, Phil, they work with it. They are the business that sponsored the Reeve, Wilco and Bielsa mural in Guiseley, so good people. West Yorkshire Electrical, fully accredited, full range of services, far too many to mention here, both for your home and for your business. They specialise in renewable technologies. And with the schools going back here in the UK, it's worth mentioning that West Yorkshire Electrical do loads of commercial work in schools as well. So if you're in charge of one of those, give them a call. Fire alarm, security services, lighting installations, solar panel installations as well. And they cover the whole of Yorkshire and beyond. And it might even venture over the hills if you do ask them nicely. Finance available for work on your home or your business. wyelectrical.co.uk for details, or search West Yorkshire Electrical on your socials. There we go. We've done that. Welcome them along to the show, and welcome you along as well. Phil Hay from The Athletic, Dan here from The Square Ball. We are reflecting here at the start of the week show, Phil, on the performance against Sheffield Wednesday, goalless at Ellen Road as it finished. And the lead off on your article, the main theme of it on The Athletic, your report on the game, is about Leeds having to learn how to manage these games and break these teams down.
Yeah, our schools weren't back today, by the way. Well, at least one of them wasn't, but I'm not here to moan about teacher training days, so I will moan about a 0-0 draw at Ellen Road instead. Yeah, it made me think that if we go back to the previous two seasons that Leeds had in the Championship, they saw a lot of this. And I think they're going to see a lot of it this season, based on the fact that the first three games that they've had at Ellen Road, the first three league games, have followed this pattern of teams sitting deep, of teams not wanting to commit, of teams trying to pick them off with odd chances here and there. And of Leeds really having the challenge put to them of, can you break us down? Can you open us up? Do you have the craft and the invention to cut through us? And it is difficult in circumstances like Saturday, where you do have a team camped behind the ball and where room to play and room to work in, particularly in the centre of the pitch, is very tight and very negligible. When Leeds were in the Championship 2018-19, 2019-20, when they won the title, one of the things they were very good at was confronting teams like Sheffield Wednesday on Saturday and finding a way to either annihilate them at the best or to find a way regardless, even if it was difficult to find a way through. And I think that was kind of the story of the game on Saturday, that there may well be a lot of games like Saturday's match. There may well be a lot of tactical approaches from visiting teams which are pretty identical or similar to Wednesday's. And, you know, if Leeds are going to play a significant part in the promotion battle, these are the sort of teams that you do need to beat. These are the sort of teams that you do need to find a way past. And it was a struggle. I think Farkas was right and fair to say that there were chances to win that on Saturday. Wednesday did have a couple themselves, a couple of very good ones, Callum Patterson's in particular in the second half, which was a far more competitive part of the game than the first, where it really was Leeds on the front foot. But there wasn't enough, I don't think, and the ideas weren't really there when it mattered. The ideas seemed to dry up quite noticeably, I thought, as it crept on towards full time. And I suppose you should be wary of sniffing at a 0-0, because Leeds just do not do 0-0s, haven't for a long time, have not been in the habit of recording clean sheets. And I suppose that is something for Farkas to be pleased about. But it was, I think, from start to finish, a little bit of a slog on Saturday.
In your article about this game, Phil, you drew some comparisons, and it's easy to do, isn't it, as well, because we're back in the Championship, we're looking to get out of it. Farkas likes to play possession-based attacking football. It's easy to draw comparisons with Bielsa's side, particularly, as you mentioned in your article, the 3-0 down at Carrow Road that nearly saw Daniel Farkas getting the boot for Norwich before they went on to win the league title that year. So it was the first Bielsa season. Do you think this football that Farkas trying to deploy, is it slightly more pragmatic than Bielsa's football? Is it as attacking? Is it as out and out trying to score the goals?
No, I don't think it is. But then generally the football I've seen over the years has never been as out and out attacking as Bielsa's style. And I don't think any of us were anticipating that from Farkas. I don't think anybody was necessarily asking that from Farkas to be that extreme in the attacking levels. It's just to create a team who are ambitious and do look to win games, which undoubtedly Leeds have tried to do so far. Farkas was talking afterwards about the start of the season so far, and it's been mixed, I think it's fair to say. They had a very good result against Ipswich down at Portman Road. They were unlucky, I felt, not to beat West Brom. Even though it was a late game against Cardiff, I thought they had most of that game, probably did deserve to win it. Birmingham was poor performance generally and a poor game, and I think it was hard to complain with getting picked off right at the end of that. They hadn't played well enough really to deserve very much from it. But he was referencing back to the season, the first season when he won promotion with Norwich, and he was saying it was quite a slow burn there. At this stage of the season, they had fewer points, which is correct. Timo Pukki hadn't scored any goals, which again is correct, and clearly he went on to be really big part of their team that season and really influential in them winning the title. And I think you have to remember that, Leeds and Bielsa started like a house on fire in that season. And it is very rare and unusual to see a team click as rapidly as they did. I think it will forever be pretty remarkable that Leeds and Bielsa were able to do that in that summer. But that season, it was Farkas and Norwich who won the title, and they won the title irrespective of Leeds going to Norwich and, as you referenced there, beating them heavily 3-0, putting Farkas in a position where his job was under quite a bit of threat, as I recall. And at that point, there was nobody tipping Norwich to do anything particularly, and in the end, first place was theirs. So I can tell, and he's been pushing this narrative from the start. I think Farkas, that it can't be an overnight thing because of the circumstances, because particularly the way this summer and the transfer window has been, I think that's probably a fair point to make. I think he knows that Leeds will have to improve and will have to get better. But I suspect he'll have gone away from Saturday thinking 2 weeks of international break now, bit of a chance to have a concerted think about what's going on with the team, what's going on with the tactics, without anything in the way of distractions, of which there've just been endless amount through the close season and through the early part of this season. And perhaps on the other side of the international break, it will be a proper chance to find some rhythm, to get into a bit of a pattern and to get some consistency in the results, consistency at a good level.
And the transfer window closed, obviously, only a matter of hours before the Sheffield Wednesday game. We're going to have a bit more in-depth analysis of the transfers, I think, aren't we, towards the back end of the week, with it being the international break. Look at maybe what went right, not quite so right, that sort of stuff, Phil. But with that in mind, we saw the 0-0, our inability to break them down, blooding a lot of new players. We saw Jed Spence getting his first minutes on the field, same with Glenn Kamara. Does it feel to you, as Moscow said on our shows in the wake of the Sheffield Wednesday game, that in many ways the season starts now?
To a degree, without wanting to disregard the importance of the games that have gone by already, because obviously they do matter. But you're right. I mean, Kamara getting his first minutes, Spence getting his first minutes. I think he was particularly impressive. The little period he was on the pitch. Although I have to say with Spence, I don't look at him and think of him as an impact player. I look at him and I think of him as somebody who needs to play. I just think he's very, very, very talented defender, very talented right back, wing back, and I think would be extremely good in that position as time goes on. But yeah, there's a lot that Farkas needs to work on that he hasn't been able to, or players he needs to work with who hasn't been able to because of the late arrival. Gruev from Werder Bremen wasn't in the squad on Saturday, wasn't ready for that game because of how late the deal had gone through. Kamara obviously signed shortly before. Jadon Anthony, who was the make weight in the deal for Luis Sinisterra going to Bournemouth, again, that was done last thing on Friday before the deadline. So there was never any chance that he was going to be in the squad on Saturday, which means that, the starting lineup and the 20, as it is away at Millwall, could look fairly different. There were just, I think, some things that came out of the game on Saturday that were hard to avoid noticing. I thought it was probably the first time that Archie Gray had looked a little bit jaded towards the end of it. And I think had struggled he's been great, I think, in the first month, but had struggled a touch with constantly looking up and finding so many yellow Wednesday shirts in front of him. There was just never the scope in the match to have, gaps to pick at, space in behind to play towards. They were pretty disciplined Wednesday, and they did stick to the game plan. They didn't particularly come to win the game. They didn't come looking for a lot of goals, but they knew what they were going to do, and they were, they were. I thought the game plan for them worked as they would have wanted it to work. But you have Gray now not going away with England under 19s. I think Leeds fitness concern there, but do want to manage his workload because he's so young and because this is his first batch of first team football. I think that makes sense. But the good thing in that respect is that if Gray needs a rest, if Gray needs to come out of the team at some point, you now do have Kamara, you do have Gruev, you do have ways of mixing this up, to the extent that there was so much choice in the centre of midfield that they would have let Darko Jaby go on deadline day had he been able to sort out any of the approaches that were made for him. But also on Saturday, I thought Joe Pirro did well in the number 10 position down at Ipswich. But again, it kind of dawned on you that that game really suited him because Ipswich backed themselves. Ipswich were really aggressive, played openly, went on the attack, left space open, and Pirro was able to make the most of it. Because it was so congested and because Wednesday were trying to choke the middle of the pitch, didn't see anywhere near enough. Pirro didn't have enough of the ball, wasn't able to be influential. I think it was a day where it made an argument in those circumstances for playing him up front, playing him as a 9. And I understand what Farkas means when he says that that Pirro has this game where he likes to drop deep and he likes to link up play, and he's not just a box player, not just a poacher. But I don't think that makes him more of a 10 than it does more of a 9. I always felt that he was coming in to play centre forward. And it did just feel on Saturday that in games where it is that tight and where there is so little space to work with, maybe that is where you need him.
We've seen the team struggle a bit, even though we've now had the new additions come in. We saw it, a couple of games ago, didn't we, with Rutter up front in the number 9 position, just looking a bit isolated and balls not getting in there into them. How do you think we solve this conundrum? How do we start to break through these low blocks, these deep defences, these 5-4-1s?
I think he probably needs to work out, Farkas, exactly who it is that's going to work best at 10. Is it going to be Somerville? Is it going to be Pirro? Is it going to be Rutter? I think it's a good thing that they didn't sign Amiri from Leverkusen, given all the messing about with that deal. And given that they spent the summer clearing out people who didn't want to be here or weren't quite sure, it didn't make an awful lot of sense to be bringing in somebody else who seemed to be in two minds. But to judge Amiri purely on the basis of ability and talent, he is probably somebody who would be tailor-made and perfect for that kind of role. I think, obviously, Farkas does think that Pirro can do that job. As I say, it seems to me that it will suit Pirro far more when he has space than it will when he doesn't. And while that's quite obvious to say, I think you can see the contrast between the Ipswich game and the Wednesday game, where I did feel that him being at 9 would have been more of an advantage. Farkas was saying that he kind of hoped that Rutter's pace would have helped him to get in behind Wednesday, would have helped to stretch them a little bit. And there were occasions where that happened, and occasions where Wednesday were trailing a little, but generally it was tight, and they seemed to have the measure of where Leeds were. The defending was pretty good. They certainly have the talent out wide, Leeds. They have the creative nous on the wings. And even though some Sinisterra has gone to Bournemouth, Jadon Anthony, I think, will be a good player in the Championship. Not a like-for-like replacement in terms of ability. I think Sinisterra is a better footballer than him. But you might find that Anthony is fit more often than Sinisterra. I think you'll get a good contribution from him. But the key position, I think, at the moment to work out what works best is definitely that attacking midfield area, the 10 in behind the centre forward. Yeah,
there were points on Saturday when I was just kind of willing them to get to the byline, stick a crossing in for Joel Pirro to be there on the end of it in the number 9 spot. But because he was dropping deeper, you're not going to get that from him, are you? That sort of close range attacking play.
I sort of said at half time, you would imagine that Farkas will be looking for more energy, just a bit more snap in the passing, which is what's needed when you are up against a really low block and against a team who aren't massively willing to commit. And I totally understand why Wednesday played like that. They've had a very poor start, and that's a pretty good point for them. And you have to say, in the second half, it was far more balanced, it was far more even, and that chance for Patterson was, give or take, as good a chance as there was for anybody all day. I don't think they would have deserved to have come away with a win, but that's how it became after half time. But yeah, you're right, and it does. I think that the comparison with the Bielsa seasons is less about the style than it is about the way in which that team were able to navigate their way through matches like this, and were able to come up against this kind of conundrum again and again. How do you get through a side who are not willing to give you space to use? And they seem to have the solution time and time again, Bielsa's Leeds. They did regularly. And that's what Farkas is going to need, because there will be teams who will come to Ellen Road and have a go. Because of either where they are in the table at the time or because of the way that they play naturally. But I think we will see a lot of teams come and do, give or take, what Wednesday did on Saturday, because they'll play the percentages and they'll see it as the right way to go.
Given the way that game unfolded on Saturday, Phil, what did you make of the lateness of the subs? I was kind of willing them to happen from about the hour mark, 65 maybe, something like that. And I thought by the time 70 came around, I thought, surely now you do it. But it wasn't until 10 minutes out, was it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, we probably need a good few more games to get a feeling for the pattern of Farkas substitutions and a feeling for how good he is at turning games and changing games. It felt like it needed something else on Saturday, although I don't particularly feel like the changes did make a huge difference. But somebody like Spence, if he'd had an extra 10 minutes, perhaps that would have been useful. Perhaps that would have been good. I don't know about you. It just felt like a 0-0 game that from about 50, 60 minutes onwards, you just could not feel a goal coming. And as I say, I suppose on the flip side, to go back over Leeds' defensive record, which I did in the piece that we've published this morning, it's been so poor for such a long period of time. And, eventually you have to get a grip of that. And Farkas will be pleased that there is a clean sheet on the board. But I think given the way a lot of games are going to go at Ellen Road, your own clean sheet is only as important as breaking the opposition's clean sheet, because a lot of teams are going to come looking for that first off. Yeah,
it's still something to build on, though, isn't it? It's a platform to build from, and I think that's my big takeaway from this game. As disappointing as it was to see us kind of hit that brick wall over and over again, it's the sense that there is better to come, and maybe just the timing of the window, and then this game coming hot off the heels of it closing, and how late we did business. All those things kind of factoring into why we couldn't break Wednesday down. And I've got faith in them. I don't know about you, but I've got faith in them to start solving these problems.
Yeah, and the good thing is that for a while now, you can park the politics, of which there's been an inordinate amount through the summer, too much, and too many things that have dragged attention away from the games. I mean, the number of podcasts where we've kind of got onto the fixtures as a bit of a throwaway 2-minute chat towards the end of it, because there's been so much else to get into, is kind of ridiculous. And I know that is how the summer tends to be. I know it's how the transfer window can be, but I think Salford in the League Cup is probably the best example of a game that people were barely thinking about until it actually kicked off, because of everything else that was going on round about. And that has been difficult. I think it has been tricky for Farkas. What he has now is players in the door. He seems pretty content with his squad. I think we've spoken about number 10. I suspect there'll be chat at various points before the turn of the year about left back, although I thought Shackle was actually really good there on Saturday. I do think he's had a strong start to the season. But for Farkas now, these 2 weeks, obviously, where he can do a little bit of work, but he now just has open space in which it is just training and games and training and games and training and games. And okay, there's Nonto there in the camp who was agitating to go at various points through August, but that feels as if it's calmed down, and that feels as if it's been settled in a way that Sinisterra clearly hadn't been sorted out and hadn't been resolved. So you would like to think that Farkas will have a dressing room now where the kind of attitude in it and the feeling in it is fairly united, fairly together, fairly positive, and that you essentially have a group of players who do want to be here. And it'll be the first time in a while that's been true.
Mentioning Shack's there in passing, I thought he was great. I thought Ampadu was great. The two probably standout players on Saturday.
Yeah, Ampadu is well worth mentioning. I thought he was the best of the two centre mids. And I was chatting to somebody who was saying he's got all the feeling, Ampadu, of a player who is too good for the Championship, but still to prove that he's good enough for the Premier League. Kind of at the moment, I think very much in that bracket of midfielder who any Championship club would take any day of the week. But needs to push himself forward, needs to progress to get himself to the level where if Leeds do go up, he's effective in the Premier League, or if he ends up somewhere else further down the line, he's able to play in that division. But yeah, you're right. He was really impressive. Shackleton was really impressive. I just feel constantly like I need to buy Shackleton a pair of boots with some tighter Velcro or some better laces.
Twice in 2 games. Can he make it a hat trick at the back down at the Den?
The one at Ipswich was amazing. Actually, it was like Chris Finch throwing the boots over the roof. It went for miles.
Oh, in the office.
It went further his boot than I can kick a ball, I think. So it wasn't quite like that on Saturday, but yeah, it's a recurring theme.
It was a kettle that he chucked over the pub, wasn't it? Not a shoe.
Was it kettle? No, I thought he threw his shoes over there, did he not?
Oh, I can't remember now. Probably.
Yeah, the kettle was the pretend coconut.
Something we can revisit when we talk later on in the week is the transfer window and the impact it's had. And I think this, but possibly worth touching on very briefly now, this break is actually quite welcome, I think, in terms of giving everybody a chance just to exhale, calm down, let things bed in a little bit at Leeds, because it is, as you've touched upon, I think, both on socials and in articles as well, it's been unlike anything I've experienced this window in terms of churn. the stress related to the churn, and obviously transfers have become, as you've said before, their own almost sub-industry of football, haven't they? The way that they're spoken about and tweeted about 24/7, it's absolutely relentless. And I remember waking up on Sunday morning, and whilst there's a sense of disappointment at Leeds only being 0-0, just thinking, I don't have to stress about what Leeds are doing in the market today.
It didn't feel on Saturday like there was a huge amount of energy left, which kind of makes sense. I mean, it was almost as if Sinisterra had burned the last of that. And I don't mean with the players specifically, but I just mean around the place. Sinisterra saga felt like it had burned the last of that right at the end of the window. I mean, I remember speaking to my editor at The Athletic after Leeds were relegated on that Sunday night. We ran a big piece on Radrizzani, and the theme of it was, what next? This guy owns the club, the majority stake. What he does next, his decision, that's going to shape everything. Does he sell? Do the 49ers buy, and so on? And I said to my editor, this summer is going to be non-stop. It is never ever going to be breathing space in this summer, because there's so much to do, and there's so much unpredictability and so much that needs to fall into place, some of which is beyond the club's control, that they'll be going at this right until the end. And I think Sinisterra needing deal sheets to get to Bournemouth, and for Jadon Anthony to come the other way in return, was kind of symbolic of the way it's been. And we can maybe chat more about this later in the week, but it is this and the summer of 2007, when they're in administration, are by a mile the two busiest summers I've ever covered, the most complicated summers I've ever covered. And I think the thing about 2007 is that goes way beyond this summer as well. I mean, that was complex and unclear in a way that I don't think we'll ever see again, at Leeds. I don't mean to tempt fate by saying Leeds will never get into financial trouble ever again, but I think people's knowledge and understanding now of administration and insolvency and financial issues is so much greater and clearer than it was back then. And a lot of that summer was an absolute mystery. It was also unprecedented in a lot of respects. You didn't quite know how things were going to work out. And it did, on Saturday, it was kind of like there was no more drama left to give on that particular weekend. The window had been as it was. Everybody needed a little bit of a breather. And I think you're right. I don't think these 2 weeks are bad for anyone.
Was that your big takeaway then from the weekend? The fact it's just a chance for us all now to kind of draw breath and see where it goes from here in a footballing sense?
Well, I felt like Ipswich was a little bit of a reset, in as much as the club had almost got to the point where what they needed to deal with, the problems, what was problematic, they needed to be sorted out, had been dealt with. But then, of course, there was the issue with Sinisterra in the end. When we were chatting last week, we were kind of talking about the possibility that he might go before the window closed, talking about the possibility of a loan. And the reason for that was that despite what Farkas had said, about things being resolved and him back in training and everything else, from speaking to people around the club, it didn't feel as if the Sinisterra issue was closed. It didn't feel as if his attitude towards the release clause or his issues, his problems with how the release clause had been handled had gone away. And that's how it proved in the end. So it wasn't a great surprise. But I think this probably is reset point now. You've got the players that you've got. They can't go, even if Nonto kind of sees himself elsewhere. There's absolutely no scope for him exiting the club until January at the earliest. I wouldn't have said again in his performance on Saturday there seemed to be any attitude problem. In fact, I thought he was the one player after half-time who seemed to be turning it on a bit and seemed to be getting going. You felt as if, if it was going to happen, it was probably going to come via Nonto or something that he did. So, yeah, what Moscow said there about the season starting properly is probably right. And if we're being honest, looking back, was probably how it was always going to be.
So final question then. Good point, bad point, or ask you again in May?
And probably ask me again in May. I think indifferent point would be fair. Absolutely, they are the teams you have to beat if you're going to get into the promotion mix, if you're going to go up. And again, to go back to Leeds' previous championship seasons, that was what they did. So regularly and so routinely was turn teams like that over, even if it was narrow, find a way and make it happen. But, I think if you get into October and November and you're still having problems in fixtures like this, that's when it compromises you and that's when it starts to cost you. But I think at this stage in August, it's not something to lose sleep about massively.
No, we will wrap up the transfers then back towards the back end of the week, the show for Friday. We've got propaganda coming on Tuesday, our weekly roundup on Thursday ahead of all that. We'll speak to you soon. Cheers, Phil.
Thank you.
The Square Ball Podcast.